It's Nick and Neil's Summer Millwall History Show.
No Millwall supporter can follow our club for very long, listeners, before becoming aware of what we might call the dark side of our history. I don't think anyone can truthfully follow our club and not know of it. Let's be adults here, listeners. Joining me to discuss the darker side of Millwall history, namely the ground closures of Millwall history, is my confederate, my co-pilot, Mr. Neil Fissler. Welcome to the show, Neil.
You're determined to get us cancelled for this one, aren't you?
I think you can't follow the Lions and not know of this. It's impossible. I think it's a very fine balance to walk. If that makes no sense. Anyway, listeners know what I mean. I hope, because I've never wanted to do a show, Neil, that kind of revels in what we're talking about here, but equally you can't not acknowledge the fact that it exists, and secondly the humour that comes with it. You can't. There's a hard balance to find in there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And we are a Millwall history show, so we are talking about Millwall history, and this is Millwall history. It's and it's an aspect of Millwall's history that is never spoken about.
But we're going to try. We're going to cover the 4 times that Mill's ground has been closed. In fact, it's part of the reason that I thought it'd be worth mentioning this is because I read a piece the other day that FIFA are talking about closing grounds in the recent spate of pitch invasions and assaults that have happened at various locations across Europe and the world, for that matter. But they're talking about trying to close grounds as a punishment for such incidents. Of course, we, more than any club, I don't know if actually we've had the most ground closures. I couldn't find that record online. I don't know if anyone actually keeps a note of the most, club with the most. We would be contenders for such a, is it a crown or an infamous crown anyway? With 4 ground closures over the course of our history, Neil. The first one that I found was in 1920, and it followed a 1-0 win for Millwall over Newport County. Match played on the 16th of October in 1920. Goal scorer Keane in front of 25,000 at Coldblow Lane. Just our 11th game as a Football League club, Neil. And I found a wonderful report from the London Daily News dated the 18th of October 1920. Headline, goalkeeper and crowd, lively incidents at the Millwall ground, Welsh team's fault. And I love that. That's allocated. That's got them blamed, done and dusted. It's their fault, really. This followed an incident in which the Newport goalkeeper became embroiled in an argument with the Coldblow Lane end, I think, and waded in. Started a fist fight broke out involving the player and the crowd, which is quite something, isn't it? I mean, eat your heart out, Eric Cantona.
Yeah, no. Well, Newport County was described as dirty in one match report.
Dirty.
And I asked a question on Twitter earlier on. What kind of place was Newport in the 1920s? And I suggested to a Welsh journalist that it might have been industrial and tough.
Yeah.
And he agreed. There were other people that said tough, but not as tough as the valleys. But it was a booming place. Because apparently
steel, isn't it? Is it not a steel town, Newport, in its time? Or have I got it wrong?
Yeah, there are also docks. It's coal. It's all sorts. It's it's one of those industrialised centres, isn't it? The whole of Wales was like it. But apparently, the referee, one E.A. Rogers, should have inserted himself more on the game than he did.
Right.
Millwall took punishments. But the was not as tolerant as the players, according to one match report. And so the game turned it was played in a very ugly mood. Yeah, but I love all of this stuff. And Jack Cooper, who was the Newport County goalkeeper, was an FA Cup winner with Barnsley in 1912. So probably tells you that probably not the worst kind of player, but certainly would have been one of those players who didn't take any shit.
Yeah.
But he jumped over the fence to have it out with the barrackers that were behind him. And one match report said, how the game ended without a riot is a mystery. And Mr. Cooper proceeded to punish his assailants with his fists. And we get the ground closed.
Impetuous action, my report says here. Impetuous. The crowd, the crowd, in fairness to Cooper, and this is the Daily News report, Neil, the Millwall crowd were visiting the sins of his associates. So the outfield players who were committing this dirty, rough play, the goalkeeper was getting he's getting his ear bent for it, and I imagine one word has led to another.
What a phrase that was. The sins of his associates.
The sins of his associates. And they continue on your theme, actually. Cooper was ill-inspired when he jumped over the fence to have it out with his barrackers behind the goal. It will be a pity indeed if the league hauls him over the coals for his natural impetuosity. The reporter here says there was every semblance of a rough house until near the close of play. I just love that phrase, a rough house. I remember an old boy when I first started going, referring to a rough house when some away fans dared show their faces in Coldblow Lane. It's a phrase that's always stuck in my head. Newport County, says the report here, showed up well in one department, which was roughness, and Millwall could not compare in that sense. Another report, I can't believe this, actually, listeners. Unsportsmanlike Millwall crowd give Newport a bad time. Can you believe that, Neil? Unsportsmanlike then? Corinthians, I would have thought.
Yeah, but we are the Corinthians of football fans, aren't we? Believing
dear.
And honesty and everything else. But funnily enough, I was reading this earlier on. I should have researched this a long time ago, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I was left with a sense of injustice towards Millwall. Because at no point, the judgment says missiles were thrown by a section of spectators.
Stones, according to this. I think stones were chucked at him.
Yeah, but that wasn't originally said, was it?
No.
Let's face it. Yeah, we have got previous for stoning players. I think anybody
I think I've read of that on the Isle of Dogs. Didn't a brick land on someone's head?
We did it in a podcast, didn't we? I think a couple of years ago. But stones were thrown, and there was a considerable amount of disorderly conduct, bad language, and intimidation of visiting players. Now then, you want to intimidate the visiting players. Good God Almighty.
Oh dear. 102 years ago, listeners, there we are.
You cannot have any bad language, and you cannot intimidate the visitors.
Don't be a tosser. Neil.
But Jimmy Broad was censored for his comments made to the referee.
Yeah.
And I believe that Mr. Cooper was reported to the FA of Wales, who would have been in charge of all disciplinary matters pertaining to Welsh teams. And our ground was closed.
It was indeed. The Pall Mall Gazette. I do like to raise the tone of our journalism here. The Pall Mall Gazette says the commission of the FA met today to consider disturbances that occurred at the Mill ground on the occasion of the league match with Newport. Decided after hearing the evidence to order the Mill ground be closed from November the 22nd until December the 4th, inclusive, and further that the Mill will pay the expenses of the commission. So we had to pay costs, basically, which forced out a home fixture with Norwich City. I think we solved that, Neil, by reversing the fixture. We played Norwich away which was due to be a home game, and then reversed it as they used to back then by playing them outside the closed zone, so to speak. So,
yeah, we played them at the Nest, but something I didn't realise was, of which boiled my blood to a certain extent, was the Nigels had their hovel closed at the same day. Was closed during the same period for attacking Southend players as they left the pitch following a cup tie. Now then, it just seems as if it was just one penalty fits all. Like,
yeah,
we only threw a few things at the visiting goalkeeper, who then proceeded to jump into the crowd.
It still hurts. It still hurts, listeners. So,
it's bloody annoying.
There we are, 1920. Was the first of the 4 occasions upon which Millwall suffered the indignity of having our stadium closed. Shall we move along, Neil? The second occasion came in 14 years later. Millwall 0, Bradford Park Avenue 1, a Division 2 fixture played on March the 24th, 1934, which was a tough season. This was a relegation season for Millwall. And also we'd suffered the death of long-term manager Bob Hunter. Great name. We've mentioned Bob Hunter many, many times on the show. So this was a pretty tough season, really, to be a Millwall fan. 9,882 at Coldblow Lane. The Sheffield Independent, Neil, speaks of an incensed crowd. Millwall followers create a disturbance. Remarkable scenes occurred at the end of the second division match between Millwall and Bradford at New Cross. With about a quarter of an hour's play remaining, the crowd became so incensed they were displeased by some of the referee's decisions, common feature of Millwall life. That certain section of the crowd pelted Mr. B.L. Clark of Birmingham, referee, with missiles. When the whistle went for time, the majority of the crowd refused to leave the stadium, and a big force of police had to be called before nearly half an hour later the spectators were finally dispersed. After several demonstrations against the referee, the Millwall players, and the directors of Millwall, that gathered pace. That escalated, that one, didn't it?
Yeah, but the only people that got away with it were the Bradford players, I think. And but I think it was an interesting time in Millwall history. I think we changed our style of play that season. There was an interesting newspaper article. Apparently, Bill McCracken tried to bring a better class of football to the Den, but it failed miserably. We were relegated, and a note was made that the players probably weren't helped by the booing and the jeering and the throwing of missiles. Probably had something to do with that as well.
Oh dear, yeah.
Another draconian penalty. We were ordered to close the ground for the first 2 weeks of the following season, because it happened at the end of the season, and we were not allowed to play within a 6-mile radius.
They used to do that, didn't they? They used to impose, X number of miles radius.
Yeah, well, Manchester United, it happened when they ran riot in Saint Etienne in the.
That's right. Yeah, it was a European Cup game when it played at. Was it Plymouth? They played at.
Yeah, no, it was played down in
Home Park.
Yeah, but it had to be 200 miles away from Manchester.
Manchester, that's right. I think we'll come back. I'm jumping around, listeners. I'll talk about the others later. I've got a wonderful report from the Sunday Dispatch, 25th of March, 1934. Incidents of the police and the Millwall crowd, conflicting views of the match scene. Their special correspondent, you're in trouble when a special correspondent is dispatched to Millwall.
Probably their war correspondent.
Hooliganism, there's a word, hooliganism amongst some of the spectators. Missiles were thrown at the referee and the visiting players, and a policeman had to walk onto the pitch to quell the unruly players. He's had to get involved with the players. There was an incident when a Bradford player was laying on the ground and to all intents unconscious, with practically all members of both sides round him aiming blows at one another. So there's one man down and a free-for-all going on around him. At the end of the game, the Bradford players left the field. They won it 1-0, pelted with missiles. The referee was called for. The angry spectators wanted the referee thrown to them, like the January the 6th Capitol Hill mob wanting the was his name, Mike Pence. They wanted him thrown out to them. And they didn't dispense the area until after the game under police supervision. Some great comments here from Tom Thornhill, isn't it? He's had to speak up again, Tom.
Poor old Tom. He had to deal with all of this.
He set this up on the Underdogs.
And then he had to deal with all of this. And I do feel sorry for John Berylson having to deal with some of this stuff. But this guy's dealt with it 2 or 3 times.
So Tom says that, yes, there was some barracking of the referee at the close of the match. Just as there often is at any ground, there was some catcalling outside the director's room, but nothing else. It's untrue to say there was any interference by the police at any time. One of our players got hurt by running over the touchline against the fence, and the policeman helped the trainer to pick him up.
Very nice.
And assist him to the dressing room. No police went onto the field of play. No missiles were thrown at the referee or the crowd. And the crowd dispersed without the intervention of the police. No complaints against players or crowd was made to any official or to the Millwall Football Club. So basically, everything that we've read was untrue. Pack of lies. That was.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's worse: the Millwall games or referees throughout it.
Oh dear, and as you say rightly, the ground was closed as a consequence, and the first 2 weeks of the season, 1934-35 season, and that you might think will be that, but not down the den, dear listeners. So that was 1934. We're going to take you 13 years forward now, Neil. We've had a worldwide conflict, but no peace at the den. Not 1947, 18th of October. Millwall draw 3-3 with Barnsley in front of 23,627, and a familiar story of the referee being escorted from the pitch again, accompanied by police.
Not the first time in Millwall history, nor the last time in Millwall history.
No. This is the Weekly Dispatch. Escort for referee. With a police escort for referee after a rather too vigorous a match. I think that's masterful understatement. That's Tom Thorne level of underplaying a situation. 17 minutes from the end, Mill leading 3-2. Listeners, Barnsley were awarded the penalty from which Baxter scored, making it 3 each. Annoyed by the award of the penalty, a number of spectators rushed onto the ground at the end, and police escorted referee Tedds to his dressing room. So that's all we
grappled with somebody, apparently, according to one of them. Grappled with him.
That's a good word. I like that. Grappling. You don't get enough grappling going on in this world.
Yeah, I would have thought that they probably beat the shit out of him.
He's given a penalty. He's given a late penalty. We've lost points there. There we are. I only found that one match report. I love this report. The Penge Gazette. We wouldn't have thought that'd be a very friendly paper towards us. The Penge Gazette, dated 12th of August 1947, said that Millwall was sore over the penalties that have been meted out by the FA. The ground was closed for a week, which had dashed our hopes of having our biggest gate of the season, which I imagine was Saturday's game with Newcastle. Sorry, yeah,
Newcastle United. The game had to be moved to Selhurst Park because the 6-mile radius, that draconian rule again, ruled out as giving the Valley one of the greatest days in their history by hosting a Millwall home game.
Absolutely. Jack Cox said we feel sore about the whole thing now. Particularly, the decision should have been held over for so long and imposed on us when we were expecting a record crowd of the season. We've just spent £4,000 on a centre forward, and we were hoping we're going to be hit badly financially.
Yeah, and not for the first time in Millwall history, nor the last yet again. Secretary Cecil Linley commented, "The club and spectators have to suffer for the actions of one or two people who can't keep their tempers."
Hot heads, they are.
Hot heads. Can you imagine that? No, we think there don't be a toss that was bad enough.
I don't know if any of this sounds familiar to your listeners. Hotheads that can't keep their tempers. I don't know if you've ever come across that at the Den.
Never, ever, ever.
I've never seen
Millwall of people. Yeah, the people got hot-headed and failed to keep their tempers. I refuse to believe that.
There we are. So yeah, punishment meted at 1947, and that brings us on to a game I remember. I was there, dear listeners. 1978, Millwall won in FA Cup quarter-final. Millwall won, Ipswich Town 6. Played on the 11th of March, 1978, in front of 22,882, one of which was me. And this is some much more noticeably how much more lurid the journalism becomes, Neil, when you fast forward to the late 70s. I'm looking at the Daily Mirror here, which has the infamous quote from Bobby Robson that the Millwall fans are animals and he'd take a flamethrower at them, which I think was said in the heat of post-riot tumult. But the whole back page, there's a picture of a chap here I've got with two St John's ambulance men with the guy's got his head cut open. Rioting Millwall fans brought yesterday's FA Cup quarter-final at the Den to a halt for 18 minutes after they started attacking Ipswich fans. It was on a Match of the Day, I think, as well, which added to, it was the first one, I suppose, it was televised. And the others were all played in front of special correspondents from the gentleman from the press. This was actually on BBC TV, which didn't help our cause.
Yeah, no, I think that obviously there was... this just wasn't strictly a Millwall problem. It was something that was happening all up and down the country.
Yeah.
Every Saturday of the season.
Yeah.
But you watch the big match and the big match revisited, and you never see it, do you? It's almost like now when somebody runs onto the pitch now, they pan away and they start showing you the mundane shot. Or they eating a hot dog or something like that, don't they? Or eating a pie when is ensuing, and they almost gloss over it, don't they?
They do. I mean, it was a game that was getting away from us. We were behind early, I think, from memory. Ipswich were a first division side, and we were struggling. Still second division, I think, but we were struggling under George Petchy at this point. It was the beginning of a fairly tough period in Millwall history. This game also post-dated the infamous BBC Panorama programme that had been put out in the late 77, I think. In fact, the report here refers to Mill supporters and their notoriety when they were featured on BBC's Panorama. I think one thing that really leaps out at me is it was the beginning of a name association that's never escaped us, Neil, as a club, that this is a trouble club, that what happens at other clubs somehow isn't seen as nearly as bad as the notorious Millwall Football Club. And I think that association really began from this late 70s period onwards, and the events of Panorama and then the Ipswich games. We've never shaken it. I don't think we ever will shake it entirely, no matter how many good deeds and good works that the club and fans do. There's always going to be that linkage, and it starts from here, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's right. Ipswich, I think, didn't they win the cup that year?
They did, 78. Yeah, they went on to beat, was it Arsenal in the cup final?
I think. Arsenal 1-0, wasn't it?
A good side.
Scored. Came on. But this was a brilliant Ipswich team. But no, you're right. I think whatever Millwall does and whatever the work that Millwall do, and let's face it, there a lot of people at Millwall that do hell of a lot of good work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kelly Webster,
the food bank and the community trust generally. I mean, it does.
Community trust, Shona, people like that. But we never we don't get credit for it, I don't think, because people are always looking at, if something happens at Millwall, it's amplified 10 times. Whereas if the same thing happened 3 weeks on the trot at another club, it's it's kind of swept under the carpet to a certain extent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a. These are my own personal theory, listeners, but I think there's a public hunger for it. I think every pantomime needs its villain, and that is us. The linkage you can talk about other clubs till you're blue in the face, but it's no one's ever going to do anything other than associate Millwall with trouble. It's become so embedded in the popular mind that I don't. There's no changing that. I don't think, much as many people do try to. And there's quotes here from Owen Beeman, who's still around, Reverend Owen Beeman, near the local Dockland church. He says members of the National Front were in the crowd stirring up trouble. I don't know. Couldn't tell you personally. There were Union Jacks in the crowd, and they're not the flags of Millwall Football Club. Who knows? But the back page coverage, it's when we're front page and back page, Neil, it's been a bad night at the den. Fan fury. We get a death sentence for the club, says George Petchy. He was a death sentence for the club, George Petchy, about the fans.
Some of this team, I think, if you have a look. Brian Chambers, Brian Hamilton, and
these are tough times.
They really were, but in some ways he's right. We never really get over these incidents, do we? It takes us
we don't. No.
to get over this and the Luton. The evening out.
Well, there were incidents. I mean, this was 1978, and there was an FA Cup time where I think there was a match played at Slough, I think, in the FA Cup in the early 80s, where it kicked off. And I think we were. I mean, it's quite difficult maybe for younger fans to realise just how low the gates were at this time. In the aftermath of these incidents, I remember going to one game. If there were 3,000 people in the den, I've been surprised, and it was just a sense of the club was fading away, Neil, somehow in those early 80s years. I mean, the players were poor, the form were struggling in the third division, and it just seemed that the club was dying. I mean, maybe the death sentence here was not so inaccurate. The punishment for the Ipswich game was that the ground would be closed for the visit of Bristol Rovers and Mansfield. They had to be played at a ground more than 12 miles from Millwall, which led to one of the strangest games I've ever been to, which was a home game against Bristol, played at Fratton Park in Pompey's ground. And I went down to that game. It was very strange.
It never made sense to me back then. Now, if your ground's closed, you play it behind closed doors, don't you?
Yeah, they didn't do that then for some reason. Don't know why.
Whereas we were allowed to go to Pompey, who had a troubled history of their own.
Bringing in Bristol Rovers, who are no slouches on their day, or they weren't in the 70s anyway. And then it will take us to Portsmouth. We got beat as well, listeners, which didn't help. It's my memory of it is still scarred. We got fined £1,500, and we were banned from playing FA Cup ties at home for the next 2 seasons. And more safety precautions were ordered. That didn't really come to pass until the mid 80s, when, of course, you had the disasters of the fire, Bradford, and then there's the Heysel, and then finally the Hillsborough disaster, which led to, I suppose, directly to the modern era of football, and in some ways, for better or for worse. So that was the final occasion, Neil, upon which Millwall had its ground closed. I picked out 2 other games just to close us, because I thought, how do we close this kind of show? And I found it quite surprising that we didn't get closed after the Derby game in 1994, when we probably would have expected to have had that, which was a 3-1 home loss in the dread playoffs. Millwall is the Daily Mirror banner headline in colour. 1,000 louts on the rampage. Hate mob kicked the keeper for Derby in the aftermath of the of the and a great old headline. We haven't had this for a long time. The Den of Hate, Neil. The Den of Hate. That was another one.
Den of Hate.
Yeah, a picture of Derby players running for the sidelines. They like the Millwall.
There were quite a few people that. Yeah, well, it was the Den of Hate for people last year.
That was a great headline, the Den of Hate. But we strangely, is that the right word? I don't know. Reg Burr did. In fact, there's a headline here from a few months after that playoff game where, incidents during the course of the game and the crowd on the pitch. A few months later, June, when the FA inquiry took place, the Daily Mirror says you supposed to be you did well. You den well, Reg, and a picture of Reg as the Lions stage a great escape and escaped punishment for the serious misconduct. I mean, Reg, I know he was a wide boy, but blimey, he was a great defender of our club. Neil, he managed to get us off the hook for that one.
Yeah, do you know what? People don't speak highly enough of Reg Burr. He was somebody. Up until the end, really, I can remember interviews in the Lion Roars towards the end of his life, and he was still a great defender.
Yeah.
Of the club and Millwall fans. Great man, Reg Burr. Yeah, well, not for the fact that we haven't seen McDonald's and Pizza Hut still, Reg, if you're looking down on the concourses. But
that was no. I mean, he was the driving force behind the creation of the new Den, Zampa Road Stadium. The club were fined 100,000 and were ordered to play 2 matches behind closed doors as a consequence of Derby. But there's a huge but, listeners. This got suspended for the next 2 seasons on good behaviour. And how he did that, I don't know, Neil. I mean, it was having been at that game as well. I mean, it was. I expected the book to be thrown at us with our history and track record. But Reg, if you are listening to this podcast, been the great beyond. You did well to escape that one. And the second one where I thought, I don't know how we had dodged this one either. Was of course,
yeah, well, this one has to be one of the great dodges in football history.
2002, listeners, 2nd of May, 2002, Millwall 0. Stern John in the last minute, Neil won against Birmingham in front of 16,319, including me again. Police may sue us over the post-match violence. There was fans hurling bricks, paving stones, flares and thunder flashes at police lines in Zampa Road after the game. The Met Police believe it was a planned riot. The disturbance lasted an hour and a half after the game. It was a major incident. There's not going to be much I want to say more than that about it, Neil, but the fact that we managed to escape, we got off the hook. Here's a report, this is from the News Shopper, 13th of November. Anyone that saw that the incidents that night will know exactly what I'm talking about, but we got off the hook.
I'm convinced, that as happens in London, if there's a bit of civil disorder to be had, you get people joining in, don't you?
Yes, you do. And
the estates and everywhere else. And I'm not convinced that it was entirely.
No, I agree with that. And here's my reason why, listeners, because I was at the game. It was a midweek game. Was it played on a Monday night or a Tuesday night? I can't remember which day of the week it was. But I was there with my ex's boy. He was following Millwall at the time. So it had been about 12. So when the goal went in, which was late, it was post 90th minute, I think it was about 90+1 when Stern John scored. I said to James, let's go, come on, we're not last couple of minutes, let's get out of here. So we actually left the stadium while the game was still last few moments of it being played out. And we came out and went along Zampa. And I saw flames at the end of Zampa. It was kicking off already down there. And so I said to him, come on, we'll have to walk a long way. I'm not going to take it at the boy 12 through that lot. You could see what was kicking off there. So my point being that the disturbances were in progress when Stern John was scoring the goal inside the stadium. No Millwall fan. You'd have had to really move fast to get from inside that stadium to getting the riot going, as I saw in the few seconds after the goal went in, and we were up in the West Upper, we were downstairs and out inside a minute from the goal going in. So I believe you're right. I believe this was linked to outside agencies. I have no proof other than what I saw, and just a sheer inability to get a riot organised in such a short space of time. So that's my belief.
Back in those days, you didn't have 24-hour news, did you? And
no,
things like that. And I can remember reading about it the following morning. And okay, there was a lot of people on the pitch when I left because I stayed till the bitter end with my son.
Yeah.
And we went out the back way. Obviously, we were based in East London, so we used to go up to Surrey Docks.
Yeah.
So all this rioting came as a bit of a shock at the time. Yeah, but I knew there was a fair few people on the pitch, and they put a line of police over to stop everybody getting to Birmingham. And
yeah.
But to read what had actually happened, and I was worried for the future of the club at the time, I must admit. We wondered how Reg Berg got us off. I'd love to know how Theo got us off.
I don't think Theo was in a very easy position. He took a lot of criticism online from people that have never been near the consequences of their actions, in the sense of trying to deal with it and continue with Millwall Football Club afterwards. I know that the club were called into meetings at the Met Police. I'm sure they would have been badgered and browbeaten into all sorts of, the press coverage was horrendous. The police were talking about prosecution of the club. Who knows where that would have gone.
I can still remember those posters that they put up at the start of the following season, and police being at the turnstiles, checking everybody who came in to see if you.
They introduced a membership scheme, Neil, didn't they? Which was like went down with like a lead balloon with people online. I don't think he was in an easy position, and I only mention it now because we didn't get any punishment. As the news shopper here puts it, in November, Millwall FC off the hook over May riots. Millwall Football Club will not be prosecuted, they say, after the post-match violence at the Den in May, the Metropolitan Police announced. About 900 fans went on a rampage. I don't know about that. I mean, numbers are impossible to tell from where I was. 100 policemen were injured. But the Met has said it was impressed with Millwall's efforts to stamp out hooliganism since May. So I imagine the membership scheme that was imposed was a price that the police extracted as part of this deal. They mentioned extra investment in technology such as cameras, which have dramatically reduced antisocial behaviour, and that also in the light of efforts made and a donation to the charity that helped policing officers. That's money changed hands, basically.
Hung the old bill, didn't we?
So the Met Police decided not to pursue legal action. This idea of legal action against a football club was always hazy. I don't think we wanted to be the first ones that explored how hazy such an idea might be.
You can't blame them, really, can you?
I can't. No. Mill FC said it would continue to work with the police to make the Den and the surrounding area a safer environment. That led on to various things, really. So you had the cameras, you had the sound mics that you'll see in the stadium, and also the walkway from South Bermondsey Station to the away end, which has combined to make the Den pretty much a secure zone now from the visiting point of view, in my opinion. Having been to other
Howard's Way open for business, and
Howard's Way. I do remember walking behind the police. I think we were playing Sheffield Wednesday in that season, because this was the build up to after a long season of I don't know how many Sheffield Wednesday fans, and maybe between 500 and 1,000 being escorted by police. Like it was like something out of the medieval times, like the arrival of the Battle of Agincourt. We had horses escorting all these people down the Alderton Road, whilst they were watched. There were the kind of fringe incidents going along, and this mob of Sheffield fans being moved back to the station, whilst incidents took place in every little nook and cranny as they went along the road. So I think the creation of the walkway was took all that out away from everything. So another incident, we escaped ground closure, but there were consequences which would continue on to this day. There we are. I hope we've done that subject justice, Neil. It's a strange one to talk about, really, mate. As we said at the start, you want to talk about it and do it justice, and hopefully get some of the humour in there. But there is also a serious side. None of these incidents have ever done us any favours, ultimately. But we wouldn't be who we are but for them. So I go round in circles on the matter, to be honest.
Yeah, no, and yeah, there's always a thought that the next one could it be number 5 on the list.
Yeah, there we are. That's the Greeks had that idea. The pendulum, the fates, didn't we all hang from the thin threads cut by the gods? I think that's probably the best way to leave it there, dear listeners. Big thank you, Neil, for staying with this show. I appreciate it, mate.
No problem, mate.
And thank you to you too, dear listeners, for joining us today. Until the next one, bye for now.
It's Nick and Neil's Summer Millwall History Show.